start the stream off with a quick level check. If you are in the chat, please give me a rating on if I need to turn the volume up or anything like that. Maybe just a little bit here. And I think with that, I've got a piece of paper. I've got a pencil. And we'll wait a few minutes for people to gather in. Those who choose to participate, I look forward to hearing you in the chat. And we can move those aside. Have just a piece of paper. So today we have a design and quick presentation, sketching tutorial. Hi Kira, hi Leaf, hi T. We have a crowd. So the main things I have in mind to go over are materials, which is pretty simple. Pencil, pen, paper, and maybe some more. And then we'll go into what perspective is. Oh, they are still low. Okay. Here we go. How's that sound? Is that better? Too high? Is that good? So perspective, but also the other kinds of projections. You know me a little bit, that I'm going to be somewhat technical and not exactly mathematical, but in my descriptions of things. So the reason I do that is because the way I learn things is associating them with how they work. And the more fundamental I can get, the better of an understanding I have. So this matters for us because that will include us as map makers, etc. Because that includes isometric. And then if we get time, we'll do a little bit of shading. I am not an artist exactly. I am a designer, and I also don't use my sketching skills daily for work. I use them daily for my journaling. I keep a diary with what happens in the day, and at the end of the day, I write. Yeah, that's not the best. I write my location on the corner. So, do I do shelf? So cell shading is a description of the way that you do it, either with an actual cellulose color or with a digital shading technique. When I'm going to go into shading, just kind of generally how lights. It's just the most basic for a sketch. Shadow, direction, stuff like that. Really, the reason you do this is it's another depth cue. So it helps your brain understand what the shape of an object is. So for me, if I'm trying to draw a object, then it'll help you understand it. And I believe that's enough to get started. Okay, so materials. I've got my Sharpie here. That's mostly just for bold drawing. Not that. So I'm not going to use this for the sketching, although you can use it for your thick black lines. I'm just going to use a pencil and a pen and a ruler. The ruler is not for sketching, but for learning. And if you can always pull it out if you want to be precise. If you're making a map, you probably will want to use a ruler. But you'll see in a bit when we get to perspective drawing why you'd want it for learning. How to do your space with the lines of the vanishing point lines. If you've done any I remember that when I was first taught this, I had already learned about vanishing point lines and stuff like that. It was really just the class that taught it to me in depth was... we will just be using it as a straight edge. Yes. So I had already known what vanishing point perspective was, but having an intuition on it from hours of practice certainly helped, and that class went into depth. So this is kind of a condensation of the class that was Sketching 101 in the design course. They called it ideation. Ideation is idea creation, where you're trying to come up with ideas and get them on paper as quickly as possible. And so ideation sketching is sketching intended to help that. Okay, so that's it for materials. Now, if you want to add the additional stuff like Ryan did in his latest video, I've got a whole pile of pens over here. And I guess I should mention the eraser. We will probably use the eraser. But mostly I have these to demonstrate that you can use different kinds of pens for it and why you'd want them. So circles, you'd want a compass for if you're doing top-down. For a perspective sketch, the circle will never be circular, so a compass will not help. Yes. So yes, we'll use the big mechanical pencil for our drawing. I wanted to find a Pilot Precise V5 is the black pen that I used for sketching the thicker lines. But now I just use my writing pen. This is a fountain pen, Lamy Safari. It's not really for drawing, but it's the pen I have with me, and I like that it's endless supply of ink because, well, you have an ink pot. The thing that I was taught, though, for the first week of class, yes, you could do a very precise ellipse, but it is better to just start practicing, because the whole point of sketching is to quickly get it out there. So the goal here is to make this tool, this just a pencil and a piece of paper, to be able to get your ideas out quickly so that you can then get on to using the precise tools you're trying to actually make your design with. So I go from here into CAD. Other people might go into foam, etc. The sketch is just like, it doesn't have to be precise. Sweet. So this pen here, basic big pen, is useful because it gives a solid black line. If you hold down hard, you can get a solid black line. But unlike a gel pen, where you get a nice solid black line, or especially like the Sharpie, you get a nice solid black line. If you use a Bic pen, then you can do a little bit of value, stroke thickness to that line. So you can practice controlling with pen pressure. You can have different strengths of the pen, and this allows you to shade. When you get to shading, you can fill in finely and shade in a square. Now, the reason I like using a pencil is not because I can erase it. It is because when I go to shade it, I can fill in this base, and then, magical moment here, I can smudge it, and it becomes a solid gray. Hi Vin, welcome. Big pens are also really cheap. And then because the tendency when you're starting, if you're starting to learn how to sketch, is to erase. I'm so glad to see you, Vin, and T. Everyone here I'm very happy right now. So the tendency is to want to erase, especially with the eraser on the back here, but really that'll just end up smudging things. So forcing yourself to use a cheap Bic pen is actually a really good way to learn how to do the sketching. But again, I like being able to shade with that blur, and then I'll come by with a thick pen that can't do any shade. So this is my fountain pen. I really can't do any shade. I can make it thinner, but I can't do the same kind of shading as the Bic pen did. But I come by with the black pen to do the outlines, and then that shaded area looks really nice. Now I would probably do the pencil sketch and then the line drawing, and then Ryan's not here yet. But yes, or maybe he is and he's just lurking. The G2 is a gel, I think. Yeah, I would say that. There's also felt, like a marker. And actually, I need to get to that. I should have listed this as the fourth material or fifth material. I'm kind of doing a bit of keep adding stuff. So I guess it's not really felt. So we've got a chisel tip marker and a brush tip marker in the Copic sketch. The Copic sketch is pretty much the king of markers when it comes to sketching. It's essentially watercolor in a pen. They come in hundreds of colors, and each one costs like $10. They're refillable, and they're alcohol, so you can refill them by just putting some alcohol to rejuvenate them. But the thing about the reason you'd want to use a Copic marker is you can do marker blending, and I've never really gotten very good at this, but I use the brush tip, and I can fill in that space and then wait for it to dry a little, blow on it, and then I can come by again for another pass, make it a little darker, and it blends together just a little bit. Yeah, Kira, this class that I'm remembering, and kind of covering over, definitely had a style to it. But this is the one thing. One of the things that stuck with me was that the teacher there taught us the very specific. This is how the style was in the 90s before we had CAD as such an important part of the industrial design process. So we were learning all of these important sketching skills that had a very specific industry style at the time. Now you can actually kind of watch the style change over time. There was certainly this Copic marker, and let me just draw something real quick. You got the pen in Copic with let me try and draw. It's like an apple mouse or something. And then you get a thick black line on the dark side, and then you shade like that with a swoosh. It's been a while. But that kind of sketch with a Copic shading probably still is very popular for industrial design, and you see it everywhere, and that's what kind of one of the things they were teaching. But again, starting with like the 90s, 80s, maybe 70s, pastels and that kind of art style that came from concept art. You can see it in, like, if you watch the Star Wars documentaries, they show their concept art for their shots, things like that. There's definitely a style. Anyway, so we were taught that style, and one of the students had their own style that was something like they would just say they wanted to draw a cube. They'd go around and come back around and do like that, something like that. That was their own style. We were being taught, draw straight lines, and he did this, but he was staying in perspective. Yes, Technical Light and Logic, Industrial Light and Magic is the company that made a lot of the VFX for Star Wars and many other films. So he had his own style, but the important thing was he was staying in perspective, which is what we were trying to be taught. So our teacher was giving us that style, but teaching us the perspective. The difference is that perspective is rooted in the real world. Now, being art, you can and should stretch those boundaries once you've understood it. But if you're trying to start with something that people understand, it's a mistake. It's actually, you do actually make mistakes if you're trying to draw something physical, and then you make a mistaken perspective. You draw your cube like that, and you say, well, this is a cube. No, if you think about that, it's more of a keycap, where it's kind of smaller at the top than on the bottom. There's no perspective that is going to look like that without this being some other shape. Now, you can then, Salvador Dali or Picasso or whatever. You don't have to stick to it if you're intending to go beyond it, but you have to start with the real world. Okay, so let's see. What are the gel pens for? No smudging, black, pitch is black. Okay, yeah, so the reason you want a gel pen is because you don't do any shading with it. So, as I was trying to demonstrate up here, the cheap Bic pen drew these lines. But if I draw, like this is no pressure, it comes out as a dashed line because it's either drawing or it's not. So if you're trying to draw any sort of shading or any sort of just like this line isn't important yet, I haven't filled it in, this is just a getting used to where it might be, you don't want it to be on and off. But if you're just trying to come in and make a line thick, then it might be good. Really, the gel pen is good for writing because you don't have to worry about your pressure. You can write anything and it will always come out nice and black. So that's what a gel pen's for. So not really for art now, or not for sketching, but everything is usable in art. So it's just exploring what works well. And like I said, I like using the pencil because I can do this shading. So this is the Bic pen shading, this is the pencil shading. I come back with the black line, but I don't need, like even then, I don't need to come back with a black line because I can make the pencil pretty dark. Okay, so T asks isometric, diametric, or trimetric perspective. So you already have some idea on the vanishing point perspective. We will be discussing all three. So yeah, we'll go ahead and move on to perspective. Actually, no, one more thing on materials. This is a stack of paper. I literally just grabbed it from the printer. You'll notice that it is not A4, it is not letter. This is legal paper that is 14 inches long. So letter page would be 11. So legal is 14 inches long and has this wonderful effect of being almost 16 by 9. So I can fill the screen with one page. It's great for UX design, UI design, because you can sketch out a web page or an app or something in perspective. You can also, if you fold it, now you've got if you fold it twice, now you've got a phone screen, or like maybe you fold it 3 times to get it to a full phone screen, but you can yeah, if you fold it in thirds, this is not that important for drawing a map, but you can imagine this is a phone screen, and I can draw 9 wireframes of what that phone screen might look like, or maybe you're using it for a short. You're trying to draw your storyboard for a short. You could put one on each of these. So that's why I use legal. I was taught on tabloid ledger, which is 11 by 17, because then you're already drawing a poster, and you can put it up on the wall, and everyone can review it standing 5 feet away. Yeah, it's definitely not a precise 16 by 9 or 16 by 12 or whatever your long phone's gonna have, but yeah, it's at 11 by 17. You can do it. It's called a tabloid when you put it. It's called a tabloid when you fold it. When you use it, I think it's ledger when you use it portrait, and tabloid when you use it in landscape, maybe, because you can then fold it in half and get 8.5 by 11s, and that's why a tabloid magazine is called that, because they just print it on 11 by 17, fold it in half. Okay, anyway, the reason I was talking about paper was you get a stack of paper, and you saw that this had marker dots on it. So the second piece of paper will always be soaking up your marker, and then the next sets, besides being there and ready for you to get a new page, they take out any sort of bumps that are in your desk, so you're not drawing with the texture of the surface underneath, you're drawing with the texture of more paper. So just always kind of grab a stack of paper, and you can rotate it. Okay, enough on material. Part 2. This is just printer paper. And again, I'm not really professional, but I did plenty of learning on just printer paper in school. Okay, so put some of these pens away. Where'd my cap go? There it is. So that was materials, and now we go on to perspective and projection. So T has already touched on the basic kinds of perspective sketching. I'll give some terms and definitions here. So first of all, I was going to use the pencil. First of all, you've got the vanishing point, which is that dot in the middle of on the horizon. You've got a point that everything vanishes towards, and I'll get into what that means in detail. But so things go to the vanishing point, they vanish at the vanishing point. So you can call it vanishing point perspective when you are thinking about that vanishing point. Now our goal, the goal is to not have to think about that. Just kind of start in being intuitive on what your perspective is, so that you can just be sketching quickly, to the point where it doesn't really matter anymore if you get it precise, because you're just trying to get something onto the page. Yes. So we have isometric, dimetric, and trimetric. So if you have a vanishing point and one vanishing point and all of the lines are going to that one vanishing point, then that is going to be your well, actually, you said dimetric and isometric. There's just a single point perspective. I don't know if you could say monometric. I don't think I've ever heard that term. But you can have single point perspective, and I'll get to what that means. And then you can have 2-point diametric, where you have 2 vanishing points, where everything goes to one of those 2 points. Something different, okay. Well, we'll see if that's true. So let me just draw an actual example. In single point perspective, I draw a square for the front of a box, and then I draw it towards that, and this is my scene. If I draw 2, then a cube can have now 2 vanishing points. So everything here and everything here. And so that would be, these are all vertical, but those are all going to one of the 2 points. And then the 3-point perspective is where you have another point way down here, really, that those go to. So I feel like I'm getting a little bit ahead because I'm doing it so quickly. I was going to start with just the 1. So T, is that what you're thinking of when you say diametric and trimetric? The effect on the perspective is still okay. I'm just not sure what you mean by dimetric and trimetric then. I know isometric is going to be, so we have faraway things aren't small, but yes. So you're saying that both trimetric and dimetric. Okay. So dimetric and trimetric being just. Okay, I'll pull that up. Okay, so where you keep it orthographic, but you've added the rotation. So, yes. Okay, now I understand. So the effect is you're rotating. No, it's helpful. I was going in the wrong definition for some things. So yeah, that Wikipedia article does have a good diagram of them. The effect is still going to be coming into play at the same times. So basically, you've got perspective, with 1, 2, and 3-point perspective, where things vanish into the distance. And then you've got orthographic. Ortho meaning straight, and graph meaning drawn, so drawn straight. Perspective meaning you're coming from a point of view. Literally, perspective would be viewpoint. So orthographic is going to have the same 1, 2, 3 with the with a let me pull that screen back up. basically how much you're rotating. And both of these are the same, come into play at the same times. So in 1-point perspective, you're looking at it straight on, and in orthographic isometric, you're looking at it from one perspective. Now, isometric usually refers to kind of that from the corner, but the terms we have in that diagram, which can't really show, can I? Maybe I can. Let me pull it out. Ta-da! Okay, so the perspective here is that fourth column. Orthographic, the names for them are as they have plan, elevation, and profile or something like that. Is when you're looking at it directly from the sides. And so this first 1-point perspective is you're looking at it directly from one side. And I'll pull up Blender in a second to actually demonstrate that. So you've got, in orthographic is coming straight, and then you rotate it. In orthographic, this would look like that, because you're actually still in line with the horizon. And then when you come by for the third one, that's when you start seeing the isometric. Now the thing about isometric, the reason you'd call it isometric is because each of these lines in each of the axes is the same length. So you could take a ruler and measure in this direction, and each of them are going to have the same, well, I guess they're always going to have the same length, but they're going to have the same angles too, I guess. Okay, so I'll pull up Blender here and demonstrate the vanishing points. So y'all can see that. Shout out in the chat if you can see the distance per unit. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so in Blender, everything is calculated. So you see with the perspective all perfectly. So I've got just a cube here and the camera. And the camera is looking straight at this cube. So if I am in this camera, even if I'm in perspective, farewell T. Thank you for coming. We have 45 minutes in, so covered quite a bit on materials, and we've even gotten into perspective. So this perspective here, we're still in perspective mode, but you'll see this is a perfect square. That's because we're looking at it straight on. That is this single point perspective. Hey Noel, welcome. Coming to take the shift from T. I was just starting to demonstrate 1, 2, and 3-point perspective in Blender so that we can then get used to it more conceptually with examples. And then we can start drawing with it. So this is currently a camera in perspective mode. And the thing I'm trying to point out is this is a square. Like it is you see that the corners are not like they're, if you took a straight edge to it, or a square, wow, if you took a square to the square, you'll find that it's square. But and when I start moving it, if I move the camera up, down, left, right, it's still square. That's because it's in the plane of the camera. So even though the vanishing point in the distance is moving around the center of the camera, the square is still square. But as soon as I move the center of the camera past that point where the wall is, you can start to see the edge of the wall. So that square is still square. And let me add the vanishing point in. So add a empty and move it with the camera. So this is the center of the camera. As soon as we cross past there, that edge of that cube, you can start to see the wall, because the back end of the wall is further away from us, and so therefore moving less in parallax than the front, to the point where now you can start to see it. And when you're here, and that's probably just easier to move the cube, when you're here, now you can start to see the vanishing point, because if I grab these and take them out towards that vanishing point, that's where they end up. So the back face here, if we just extend it out further back, it shows up as going towards that vanishing point. And that's going to stay going to that vanishing point, because the further away parts don't move as quickly. And now, when we want to start getting into two-point perspective, that's when we're no longer wanting to look at just the front square face of this. So we're going to farewell, Noel, and thank you. This is encouraging. So I'm going to rotate this cube. I've still got the horizon in the middle here, but I'm going to rotate this cube. Notice if I rotate it just around the axis of the camera, it's still a square, it's just rotating. But if I rotate it still in line with the floor, like the axis of the floor, then the front face of it starts to, one side of it gets further away from you, and so is now going to be smaller. And so this is when you start getting into two-point perspective, because if you, let's scale it down some, grab it over, and rotate. So now, if I take that face on the back side here, and I'm going to extrude it this way. So if I'm going to try and make it bigger that way, it shows up, it'll take you to the vanishing point. So I can make this bigger, grab, and go into the distance. So you'll see this one, because it's rotated only slightly in that direction, So here's the top view. Because it's only rotated slightly in that direction, it's going to vanish slower. So this line, these are closer to you than these, even though they're the same distance. Like they're the same size, but this is closer to you than that one because it's rotated. This this line is going to recede slower than this line. So the vanishing point is further to the right. It's going to take a whole, like the slope of this line, how quickly it gets smaller is not as extreme, but it's still going to a vanishing point over here. And now you can do a lot with just 2-point perspective because there's a lot of things in life that are on the plane. So you have a round Earth, but when you get close enough, you can summarize it as being a flat field. Buildings on that field are, even if they're rotated, are still going to be vanishing into that horizon. Now the 3-point perspective comes when you want to have a really tall object, and we're going to make this taller and taller, and right now it just exaggerates our 2 points. But if I now take that cube and I'm going to rotate it not along that ground plane, I'm going to rotate it away from the camera. So the top is now further away from the camera than the bottom. Now when I'm in the camera, you start to see another vanishing point. So it's all about the rotations from the camera, what is closer to you, what's further from you. And you can simplify, if you're just looking at the front face of something, you can use 1-point perspective because, well, the only things that are going away from you are still in line. Like, you've got sets of lines that are going away from the camera, and they're all going to the same vanishing point. And then sets of lines that are in the plane of the camera. 2-point, you've got this plane, and then 3-point is when you start having, basically you're looking at it not straight on. And the thing is, when you're doing an object that you're looking down on, instead of a scene, like 2-point is good for architecture. You can draw a street with buildings on it. I'm going to switch back to the pencil. So you can, with a street, like say you want to draw a street, you can do 2-point perspective, where you draw your horizon. This is what the ruler's for, the straight edge. So you draw your horizon, and then you pick 2 vanishing points on it. And now I'll say any wall that's going north-south is going to this one. We say this is north, and then this one is east. So anything that's going north-south is going to vanish to that point, and anything going east is going to vanish to that point. So I can draw a building by drawing that line, and then specifically I'm wanting this part of that line. And then we just draw vertical lines for the walls because it's along the horizon, or it's on the ground plane, I guess. And then we draw our north-south wall top here. T gets to miss the pulling out the ruler. And here I'm not going to draw all the way because I really know I only want that line. That part of it. And then, so now we've got this building that we're not looking down on, we're looking straight at. So if I want to draw a street, that works fine. But if I'm looking down at an object, like say my scene is this grid and I've got a box on it. Yeah, the grid. Grid. And I've got a box on it, which we were just seeing in Blender when I was moving out to the looking at the scene view to show you where the camera was. This part is, you're now looking down. This this line here is not in the camera plane. You're looking down at it. And so it needs to have a vanishing point as well. And so when you're drawing the like an object, you want to actually do 3-point perspective. And it's a pain to keep pulling out a straight edge to check all of your straight lines, and that's why you need to practice. And that is most of what I have practiced, is being more intuitive on where that vanishing point, where those lines vanish to. So when I draw a cube, I'm saying, okay, I draw these two lines are this one and this one. I've drawn them already going in. I don't need to pull out a straight edge because I'm just saying, okay, somewhere over there, they're going to vanish. I don't know where my vanishing point is until I've drawn the second one. But at that point, anything else needs to be vanishing to that same point. So I can imagine where they converge will be somewhere around here. And then if I want to draw a third line, I'm going to have it point in that same area. And I don't have to be super precise, but your brain will notice when there's a mistake. So now if I draw these, notice I turned my ruler a little bit. That's because I said, well, they're going to converge somewhere over here. And again, I didn't pick exactly where that vanishing point is because I don't know the scale of my drawing yet. It doesn't exactly matter where it is until I have a second line. Then I need to be consistent. Any lines that are going in that same direction. If I was drawing instead of a square, I wanted to draw a different, like I wanted to cut off this corner. That line's now going out here. It's not going to this perspective point, and it's not going to this perspective point. It's going to one here that is still going to be on the horizon. So my horizon's way up here now. And so I have moved my my frame point, like the center of my camera is actually here. And I can go back to Blender and show you that. So if I have I lost my cube, so here's my cube. And I've got my camera. I'm gonna turn the cube. It is not straight onto the camera at all, so all three of these directions will need their vanishing points. But I'm gonna move it off down here. You see it starts to distort. The center of the camera and the horizon are up there. This is still in perspective. It's a very distorted perspective, but still these lines are all going the same direction. They'll still go up to that vanishing point up there. These lines are all going to a vanishing point. Well, over here, I guess they're not in line with the horizon, so it makes sense that they wouldn't go there. So I think that's probably enough about 3-point perspective. Kira, I think if you're still there, you might be the only one still watching. But there is the VOD that people can come back to. Thank you for still being here. I know everyone else has their reasons for not being able to be here. It's nice to have you. So, I did say I was going to do a little bit of shading. I do think that it's worth saying kind of what I use for practice, or used. Don't really do it that much at the moment, but and that would be to draw a cube. So, like I did. So these two lines are going to some vanishing point up here, and then I turn and I draw 2 lines determining another vanishing point. And now I have to, that's fine, now I have to be more careful. So again, these 2 lines determine where the vanishing points are, and this third line is where it becomes critical, because when I add the bottom of this cube, I need to make sure that this is going to line up. So there's a vanishing point up there. Whatever I draw down here needs to point at that, and the end of it is going to want to be going into a vanishing point that converges somewhere down here, probably beyond the camera. Oh, I am still showing Blender. Oops. I hope you're able to follow that those were the first 2 I drew. I kind of already did one earlier. So there's a vanishing point that they converge to here, and this third one has to go up there. I also have to think of the vanishing point that it's going to converge to here. Again, mostly don't have to think about the actual point. I'm just thinking about the lines. Once I've started to intuit what perspective looks like, I say, okay, I want to draw another line that's going in the same direction as these 2. It should kind of fit. So that, I'd say, is close enough. Let's see how I did. So that one goes to there, that one goes to there, and that one mostly goes to there. So I'm off a little bit, but it's close enough. Now, we're going to start drawing this other axis. These other lines are going to go down here with this third point. So the first 2 are fine to do as long as they're going to converge on this side and not somewhere up here. I can do whatever, but now I have to think about where are they converging. They're converging like down here, so that means this one is actually going to have to be quite extreme. Maybe I can get a little bit more out of it, because I don't really want it to be super extreme perspective, but this is actually kind of the angle you're going to have there. And now these are going to have to converge at that third point. So this is also pretty extreme. And you draw it and you're like, oh, I didn't quite get it right. Well, just draw another line. But the thing is, once you have a lot there, that's when you start to make it darker. So you make it easier to do, turn it so it's easier to draw a straight line. Now, I spent a lot of time just practicing straight lines. And the thing is, yes, those are there, but they just make it thicker, and you'll get to see when we do shading you just want thick bottom lines anyway. So it kind of works out. That anywhere within that thickness is my line, that's good enough. And so the thing is, when you shade, I'll go into shading. So shading is, I've got a light source, maybe a couple light sources, but I've got a light source and it casts shadows. And so those areas are darker. And when things are close to a corner, they're darker as well. So the bottom of an object that's sitting on the floor is going to have a thick bottom line because of the ambient occlusion. You'll notice that this is not a square, not a cube, because this line here and this line here, like you can just kind of tell that this is longer. So if you're trying for a cube, you have to be a little more careful. So let me demonstrate shading a little better with just a circle. The circle is a circle, but now I'm going to add a light and I want to make it a sphere. So the light casts a shadow on whatever surface. I get to decide if it's behind or in front or just kind of in line. In line with the camera is the easiest thing, because then you can just draw a straight line and say this is the shadow line. And now, because it's going to hit a sphere, it's going to kind of go like that. And then you just make that a shadow. And it's going to shade this side of the sphere. So that part's going to be darker. And then we do our smudgy smudge. Definitely don't really need this to be a strong outline because it's just a shadow. It's going to be darker closer because it fades more. If this light is not a point light, if it's an area, it's going to blur as you get further from it. So when you go to shade a cube, you can simplify to say which sides of the wall are away from the light. So I will want to shade this one darker, and then this one is also kind of facing away from it, but not as much. And then this one is on the top side, so it might have a little bit of shading, but really not a lot. And so those three, like you can just say, if I'm drawing a cube, 1, 2, 3 sides, dark, medium, and light. Okay. So if you want to draw a map, then for the most part, you're going to be looking top down, and you're far away. So this is why isometric works for maps, is because when you have a camera and you're looking at an area, so this is my camera, if you don't use a telephoto lens, if you don't change your field of view, then you get more area only by going up. But the distance for this same area that you were looking at before, these are about the same distance from this camera. The curve, I'm maybe a little bit in the weeds here, but basically when you when you do a telephoto, when you zoom out and look closer, like you pull back and zoom in, then everything gets compressed in perspective to the point where it becomes like you've got this infinite, like eventually your camera is so far away and looking at the same area that the lines are straight. And that is when you get to orthographic again. So if you're drawing a map, you can do it top down with little squares for houses, whatever. And you can say that that was taken from space with a telephoto lens, and that's going to still look like that. But if you want to draw it further in, now you have to think about where are the perspectives. But everything still could be in this plane of the camera. So the if I draw a big square, that's the rooftop, square rooftop, but it's way over on the side in a distorted perspective, then I can just use the single point for these are in the plane of the camera and these are the walls. So you can, instead of imagining that there's a horizon here, you can imagine this as a field, and this is north and this is east. And other than trying to do a sketch, well, I guess I didn't talk about ellipses. So my practice piece would usually be to draw a cube. So I've drawn my cube. That gives me a little practice drawing straight lines. It gives me a little practice remembering to have my my lines converge. And then I want to add in ellipses. So I want to practice my circles in perspective. And I'm sorry T isn't here to see this, but basically when you're in perspective, a circle gets compressed to be an ellipse along the axis that is normal to that face. So here I've got a normal, the line going straight through the top of this cube, and the line of the axis of the ellipse, and each corner of the ellipse needs to touch because I'm trying to draw a circle that fills the whole face. So I just, as long as I'm drawing an ellipse along this major axis and this minor axis, we'll get there. I'd say that looks pretty good. I might be wrong on where the major axis goes. I'm not sure. I just kind of intuitively do it now. So this one, the axis for this ellipse is going to go through there, because this is in the center of the face, and it's converging at that same point. And then I draw the major axis perpendicular to that, and then I turn the page, so I'm only ever having to draw the same kind of ellipse. I go a couple times because I'm not perfect. And I start making it darker. And that's pretty good. It's a little compressed on this axis. And then I go ahead and do this axis. So I'll do that. Here you go, third face. Now I'll pull out my pen. So again, I draw the rough sketch, and then I draw the thick black. Honestly, the Sharpie might be better here. Draw the thick black for what I've decided is the actual lines. And then I've got my lips that I've already drawn to guide me. And then I'm going to take the big eraser, erase all the construction lines. And then we shade. So I add the pencil back in for shading, because then I can smudgy smudge to fill it in. So that's, the far side is the darkest, and then the close side has just a little bit. Smudgy smudge. At this point, I just have smudge on my finger. And then we want to add the shadow. So we just come out straight. And there's a virtual line from the back here. And fill that in with another even darker for the shadow. Smudgy smudge. Probably want to do it a little bit more, fewer lines and less thickly in order to get it to be nice and blurred. But you can do that, and you have a yep. And as for you, Kira, I don't know if you were able to get it, but I don't think it's something you have to get the first time. I don't think you have to understand the geometry of it to do it, although I enjoy doing that because I like thinking about projections and things, kind of like T does. As long as you can start saying, these lines are going in the same way, they should go in the same direction, that's when you start seeing perspective. And the class that taught me these skills was every other day we would have a new sketch that we brought in, and the teacher would just point out, yeah, these are supposed to converge more, that's not good. You need to fix that. And so it was over and over again pointing out the mistakes so that we would start to see it intuitively and say, okay, when I'm drawing that, I won't make that mistake because now I can see that I'm making that mistake. And so it is something you can start to be intuitive about. And as for drawing the lines, like I spent a lot of that time, I can use this one, just going paper at an angle, pencil in my hand, drawing a line. Now, techniques for drawing a line, you want to use your elbow, not your wrist. You can use the wrist for really up close, but when you've got a nice big piece of paper, that's when you can start moving your elbow instead. And so it's throwing a line. You never draw it towards you. and you never are planting your hand and doing this, you're starting at a point and then turning the page so that it's how you want it, so that you have as much space as possible to then throw the line. And yeah, I was honestly, when I took that class, I was not the kind of person who would draw in class all the time. And I still am not really the person to draw all the time, but I think it is. I agree with what I learned there, that it is universally useful. Anything that you can think about, you can, if you can draw it, you can think about it better. And you should, you like, it's just a pencil and a piece of paper. So if you can draw it, you can draw anything. Like, you learn how to, it takes different objects, you have to learn how to draw that object. But those skills transfer so well to so many different things, that unlike CAD or Blender, where you have to learn all these little tools and how to do it, you gain the skill of learning tools. This, you can actually gain the skill of just using a pencil, and it applies everywhere. So that's very useful to do. And so you can just say, my goal for this practice session is I want to have a bunch of things converging there, starting over here. You just sit here drawing lines. Now, I will agree that the only reason I ever did that was because I had a class that I was kind of required to do it for. But it is a skill you can learn, and it's a useful one. And straight lines, really the reason to learn lines is because straight lines are straight, and they should always be straight. Curved lines, like, okay, I drew a curved line. What's to say that that's a correct curved line? When you start drawing characters, then you start to have anatomy that's not possible. But otherwise, you have a little bit more freedom there, whereas a line needs to always be straight to be a line. It's just not a line if it isn't. So practicing that line drawing, I'll start converting over here. You can start at a point and go away from it as well. As long as you're moving from near you to further away from you. There you go. Got a little grid going. Do you have any questions, Kira? Because otherwise I think I'm near the end of this tutorial. Information overload. Fire hose. Okay, so tips on never finishing because you feel it's imperfect. Well, I think we all have this basic understanding that to get better, we do need to be imperfect, and just do it. That's thankfully something that is well taught nowadays. But tips for doing it, I think, well, for me, most of my sketches are, I spend 5 minutes or not even, I spend a minute drawing something, and I really don't have time to say, yeah, that's not good. It takes longer for me to figure out what I want to draw that fits with the prompt, which usually my prompt is something from the day. But really, there's not. I think one tip is you do not have to finish immediately. Things will still be there. If you keep the project around, you can go away from it and come back to it. And just keep working on it later. Another tip would be for drawing especially, but really anywhere that you are adding your time to do something that you feel is imperfect. So this is actually really good scope. If you feel it's not perfect yet, but that you can spend more time on it to because like you know that if you spent more time on it, maybe it would be perfect someday. Is that things that feel like they're not perfect and you messed up, you're not done yet. You just keep at it. And it's not a you failed, try again. It's very much a okay, at this point in the process, it's wrong. This line is not converging, or like it is converging with that, but it's not lined up with this point here. Like this corner and that corner, they're not the same. Well, what do I do about that? Because I want to converge over here with that, but these aren't. What do I do? I just iterate. On the same drawing, I start moving this one there, and this one there, and this one there, and just, okay, now it's closer, right? And the time that you spend is not fixing, it's the time when you can keep working on it. It's not a first step, second step, third step, I'm here. It's, oh, and I didn't do this step perfect, so this step is broken. So I'm not going to be able to attain this one because I messed up on the first step. Very often, it's not like that. It's instead, I have a scale of, quote, perfection. And the more time I spend on it, the closer it gets to what I want it to be. And that time frame can also include skill acquisition, improving on something that you weren't good at the beginning, but you needed to pick up to be able to finish. But at any point you can stop and say, it's done, it's not as good as I wanted it to be, but it's still functional, it's still good. And it will always be better. You can always imagine it being better than you have. So basically, just spend more time on it if you want it to be better. Know when you don't need it to be any better. It meets the goal, and you can just say, I'm done with that, and it's still good. Now, I will give one exception, and that is, I have a little aphorism that I say, it's not done until it's finished. Sometimes there is a step at the end that takes what you were working on and just does the last bit that finishes it. And I say that cheekily because finishing is in, if you sand a piece of wood and then you coat it and finish, Like the finishing is the name of that step, because you're adding finish to something, and it's just not done until you've done that step. So you can be done at any time with the sanding. You can make it smoother, keep going on it, but eventually you do need to put that last coat on it. So don't judge it by how it looks until you put that final coat on it, because that could be the thing that really changes it. Just a coat of white paint can make anything look pristine and clean. But see, like I've continued working on this, and this original line is still there, but you don't even notice it, really. Make this keep getting darker. Generally, when you keep drawing, the things will get darker. So that's why you really want to start with a light touch in the beginning. And it takes skill to start learning how to gain that light touch. But as you keep going on it, it gets darker and more defined. Lines get thicker because it covers your mistakes. Did that answer your question some? By the way, I can put this on here. Take this. Take that. Take that. I guess it converges right about here. And then this goes up here. That goes up there. So they converge way over there. But they are still converging. Does that join them? Yeah, somewhere over there. I guess this is maybe a little bit. There we go, a little better. Towards that direction. And then this one converges somewhere over there. As long as you're not converging in front, you're good. You don't really want this line. Like a bad thing would be if you have this line goes that way and this line goes that way. These are converging instead of behind the cube. They're converging over here. That's when you've made a mistake. I'm glad you've joined us in this. It'd be fun to see what you come up with. And thank you for the encouragement. I do appreciate it. Aha! Welcome back, Noel. I'm not quite sure what's left to talk about. I was probably about to wrap up, but now that you're back here, if you have any questions or want me to demonstrate something again, I would be happy to do so for you. Unfortunately, my actual skill in drawing Okay, here's another little tip of advice. I do not feel good about what I'm doing. I know I can draw a cube. I don't necessarily feel confident about being able to draw a dragon right off here. Doesn't mean I can't. So because of that same, you just keep iterating at it and keep improving things. Some of those things where, I don't feel like I can draw a dragon, I'm not good at it. I've got that little pain pit in the bottom of my stomach of I'm going to try and doing it in front of the camera and I'm not going to be able to do it. Well, if you only do it for 2 minutes, it's going to be a 2-minute dragon. It does take hours. You've seen Ryan make his foam tiles. Those take time to do it right, to do it well. Drawing anything will take time too. As you get better, you improve how long it takes to get to that same quality that you're aiming for. Otherwise, you still probably can do that quality. It's just going to take you longer. And so yes, 4 a.m. Wow. Thank you, Kira. Farewell. I do think that the drawing in Sharpie to demonstrate things on a piece of paper is kind of a pretty cool and perhaps unique streaming technique. So I do kind of want to do more of that. Do what Pirate Software does. Just draw a box. This is a computer. Or maybe it's just a box. Yes. Well, I already know I can't erase because this is what an eraser looks like when you try to erase. And if I try to erase this with this side, for one, it's still there, but for two, the paper's smudged. I guess it didn't come out as badly as I'd expected. But certainly when you erase with the back eraser, like I can draw with this eraser. I think the biggest thing for that is really learning to strike things out. It's okay for them to still be there. My journals, I write in pen. I have so many strikeouts and stuff. Really, it's just worth it for the extra thick, easier to read black ink. And you can always get a new page, I guess. So Noelle, did you have any questions? Or things you'd like me to try to demonstrate? Okay. Well, my guess is that, yes, Sunday afternoon is actually a really good time for me to stream. So most likely it will be probably Sunday afternoons. And we also know that Ryan doesn't stream it this time. Also, it's time boxed because I have somewhere to be at 6, although that's not a very big time box anymore. It used to be at 5. Um, and so with that, I think I will say thank you. Not thank you. Thank you for joining like and subscribe. um, I do hope to do this again. It is enjoyable. I'm not sure what to do to oh yes, I'm going to take a nap after this. I'm not sure how to advertise for beyond our little community, or if that's necessary. But maybe I'll learn how to edit something into a short or something. I don't know. It's not necessary. Someday. As I've said to myself, as long as I have one person listening that I can talk to in the chat, then I know that someone else is benefiting from this time. So, thank you for joining, and I shall see you again. Oh, that would be much appreciated. And we can talk about it on Discord. All right. Maybe next time I will do a time travel discussion. Those are always fun with our group. All right. Signing off.